007 Bloodstone, developed by studio Bizarre Creations, released in the year 2010. It was the first game in the Bond franchise to have a totally original story since 2004's excellent Everything or Nothing. I came across this game a couple years or so after its release on PS3, and from what I remember, I thought it was not only one of the best James Bond games I've ever played, but one of the best hidden gems on the 7th generation of consoles. This time I'll be revisiting it, but on a different console. Since I already played it on PS3, I figured why not try it out on the Xbox 360. So that will be the version I will be playing for this video. I won't be going alone into this retrospective. I brought along my good friend minimme to help.
Hello, hi, I'm minimme, my real name is Peter, I also review old video games, and I'm also a big fan of Bloodstone, so I'm excited to talk about it here.
Without further ado, let's see why this is possibly the greatest 007 video game you probably didn't play. The story starts in Athens, Greece, with MI6 discovering that an international terrorist named Greco is conducting a suicide attack on the leaders of the G20. M assigns 007 to take down Greco before the attack can happen. After this cutscene, you land on Greco's personal yacht, and this starts the opening mission. The first level introduces you to the standard gameplay and sets the tone for the rest of your experience. 007 Bloodstone is a third-person cover shooter, a genre that was popularized by games such as Gears of War and Uncharted.
Man only interested in the climax. He must be a real hit with the ladies.
Never had any complaints.
As you make your way through Greco's private yacht, you silently take down enemies with a silenced pistol in hand-to-hand combat, until you finally make your way to the international terrorist himself.
Who the hell are you? Call off the attack, Greco. It's over. One man against 40. I don't think so. Guards! Deal with him!
As you chase after Greco is when things really turn up to 11. You fight your way through some gun-toting thugs, avoid a machine gun turret-equipped helicopter, jump off of the yacht to a smaller boat to avoid a missile, and now you're chasing him via speedboat. The transition to the boat chase is seamless. As you chase down Greco's boat, you'll need to dodge explosions of all kinds, helicopter fire, and enemy boats firing at you as well. How you take out those enemy boats is once you get close enough to them, time slows down and you press the A button to shoot. This boat chase scene is one of my all-time favorite moments in this entire game. This is exactly what it's like to be in a James Bond movie. Also, I'm a sucker for this kind of over-the-top action and explosions. The water you're driving your boat on looks exceptional, and I love the little bits of water droplets that hit the camera. It's just a nice added touch. After you crash the boat back onto land, you fight your way through a mansion until you finally catch up with Greco.
Where's the bomb, Greco? Last chance. Where is it? You're too late.
Now you're in a car racing through Greece to catch up with one of Greco's cars carrying the bomb. This car chase scene is absolutely exhilarating. It's tight in space. The roads are small and you're speeding through traffic, which means that you need to stay focused on what's around you and what's coming at you. It also handles speed really well. The game gives you the feeling that you are in a super fast sports car going at top speeds throughout the city. Often, games slow down sections like this, but I'm glad this game didn't hold back.
This driving section alongside the boat section move so fast and are so explosive that you really can't help but just appreciate the sheer spectacle of it all. They feel exactly like the expensive Hollywood set pieces that the 007 movies pride themselves on, and though they're mechanically very simple, they play well enough to let you be in the moment and absorb the bravado. It's worth noting that developer Bazaar's background is actually in racing games. They're well known for the Project Gotham series, and they developed Bloodstone alongside another racer named Blur, which also shares Bloodstone's impressive in-house engine. You can see similarities between Blur and this driving section, like both games have a certain high-speed, realistic and visceral look and feel that is again very exhilarating.
After Bond blows up the bomb before it reaches its destination, a cutscene plays and you are introduced to a classic opening title screen like all James Bond movies. This entire first mission of the game is easily the best in any James Bond video game to date. It takes what made those Daniel Craig movies great and implemented them into an original video game, which is something that's not easy to do. Starting with stealth, then into a shootout, then into a boat chase, then crashing that boat onto land, then fighting your way to Greco with more thrilling shootouts, then a crazy fast car chase, then blowing up a bomb, and now this classic 007 opening. It did everything it needed to set the tone for the game, show the player that it takes itself seriously and that it knows what it's doing. I can't think of one thing that it did wrong or could do better, except that all of what you just did meant nothing. That amazing opening mission has no impact on the story. It's just an opener, which I get, but at least somehow interweave it into the main plot.
Bond here.
Good morning, 007. I know we promised you a week's holiday after Athens, but we have a situation developing that requires immediate attention. Are you free to speak?
Yes, I can talk.
It wouldn't be a 007 game if you didn't do a bit of globetrotting. M assigns you to a mission in Istanbul. This is the start of the actual story. For real this time, guys. Malcolm Tedworth, a senior researcher for an important defense force company, has gone missing and is rumored to sell his top secret findings. And of course, Bond needs to track him down. You investigate a construction site in Istanbul using your smartphone to locate evidence. This is just the James Bond version of Detective Vision from the Batman Arkham games. The smartphone Detective Vision not only shows you where evidence is and where enemies are, but shows you what weapons each thug is carrying. I know that that's nothing revolutionary or something to really brag about, but it's helpful when stealthing around or in a huge gunfight. You can enter smartphone Detective Vision and see what enemy you need to take out first if they have a more powerful weapon than just a standard machine gun. The whole mission in Istanbul is nowhere near as exciting as the beginning, but that's as expected. It's important for certain games to slow down for a second and not be non-stop action all the time. This is good especially for a James Bond game, because there's more to 007 than just shootouts. That's not the case with the Daniel Craig movies though. It seems those are just huge action flicks and don't really dive into the suave and charming side of 007 like Pierce Brosnan's did. We'll act like Die Another Day never happened though. Saying all of this doesn't mean that it doesn't have a lot of great moments. It just has some much needed downtime every once in a while, which is good for the overall pacing. You make your way from the construction site to an underground cistern, but not before getting chased by a huge drill that seems to stop in place when it's convenient for you. This is more of a longer area and doesn't breeze through it at a fast pace without letting you take it in. Too bad that it isn't anything to distinctly remember. If you haven't noticed, the coloring of this game is a lot of grays, browns, and blues, which is another 2010s thing. Anyway, while some people would really like to take away points from this game for being so dull, I would do the opposite and actually give it points for this. Yes, it's like someone cranked the saturation down about 90%, but I love this coloring for the game. And you want to know why? It's because it fits. It works for the type of game it is. I hate to use an overused term, but it's cinematic. And for something that's trying to stand alone as a video game 007 movie, it nails it. I think it wouldn't hurt to have the game pop with color in certain places though, like this area. Construction sites aren't the prettiest of places, so that not being vibrant makes a lot of sense.
But cisterns are known to be gorgeous. Like, fighting your way through this area could have been a lot more memorable if they'd made it less moody. There was a lot of lost potential here, especially because the real-life cisterns in Istanbul that this section is set in actually have some really stunning lighting in some areas. It's almost remarkable that they used that as a starting point and dulled it down to be this boring.
As you fight your way through a long underground area, you find the missing researcher Malcolm Tedworth being interrogated.
What is the password for the USB drive? Tell me the key to crack the code! Stop! Stop! I'll tell you. Thank you. Kill him! Let's get out of here!
For a game I was taking seriously up until this point, it hurts to hear someone say, "Tell me the password to the USB drive. Tell me the key to crack the code." You chase this mystery man and his goons in a car. Another car section is sure to be an absolute treat like before, but this is easily the worst driving section in the entire game. It's full of hard turns and awkward layouts. It would be challenging and would test the skills of the player if the car controlled well. Unlike the fast sports car in the opening mission, this car drives like a sack of potatoes. Yes, I know it's not an incredibly fast car, and that's fine for what type of chase it is. But this car feels too heavy. In a section where there needs to be a lot of turns and quick stops, I end up hitting everything and constantly being slowed down, and sometimes even losing my target. I'm glad that there was some variety in the driving, but the mechanics of this section really needed to be tweaked a lot.
Thankfully though, like the other driving sections, the visuals here also have super high production values as you explosively race through the city down to the docks. It's impressive just how much of Istanbul you see, and though it may not be enough to make up for the sloppy car handling, it maintains a certain expensive sleekness, and it's a very welcome refresh after the less visually interesting construction sites and cisterns.
Bond captures the man who had Malcolm Tedworth killed. He interrogates him to discover that the person he works for is a man named Stefan Pomerov.
Damn you! We need to finish this now!
I want a name. Who are you working for?
Never.
Let's try that again. Who is it? Who hired you? Give me the name.
Pomerov. Stefan Pomerov.
And where's he taking those papers?
I don't know. I've told you everything I know. Please!
This is some of the most wooden acting I have ever seen. I love that the legendary Judi Dench and Daniel Craig reprised their roles and lent their vocal talent. But this is so bad. Judi Dench kills it in her role, as always, and while Daniel Craig isn't my favorite James Bond, he is a great actor. This isn't the end of the wooden acting in the game, but it's easily noticeable how bad he phoned it in. M tracks down the location of Pomerov, who's currently in Monaco, due to leave on a flight from Moscow the same night. Once you arrive in Monaco, you're introduced to Nicole Hunter, your contact for this mission and the Bond girl for this video game. All she's really good for in her introduction is to deliver subpar acting and to spout exposition.
So what can you tell me about Pomerov?
He's such a lech. He owns oil wells, diamond mines, and his own 737 with gold-plated fittings, of course.
How do you know him?
Sweetie, there are only 6 people worth dating in the world, and I've probably gone out with half of them. The truth is, he supplies the chemicals used to alloy the gold and silver in my line of jewelry. And he's been after me to open a boutique in the casino he just bought in Monaco.
He bought the casino.
Another trinket on the must-have list for oligarchs. I got him to delay his flight back to Siberia. That's where he keeps the wife at his headquarters, so she can't spend all his money. And we're going to meet in the boardroom, which should give you enough time to get into his office and break into his safe.
Well done.
Now, in Monaco, you need to make your way into the museum so you can retrieve more information on what Tedworth was selling, and his plans before he was murdered. This whole level is one of my personal favorites in the game because this shows what I was talking about earlier that I loved so much about James Bond. The suave Bond in a tux making his way discreetly through a mansion in a beautiful city. There's quite a bit of stealth in this level, which suits the area perfectly. When you perform hand-to-hand takedowns, you receive the ability to use focus aim. which you hold down the left trigger and left bumper to activate. This slows down time and immediately snaps to the head of the nearest enemy to one-shot kill them. This helps in stealth in a lot of situations, but I found it the most helpful in big shootouts when I'm low on health and being surrounded by thugs trying to kill me.
This focus aim mechanic might sound familiar to you because it's very similar to the last two Splinter Cell games, Blacklist and Conviction, where Conviction actually came out about half a year before Bloodstone did. I doubt that they ripped Splinter Cell off just because both games released so close to each other, but regardless if they did or not, it really works here and it suits the game perfectly fine.
In this level, we are introduced to a small mini-game to disable security cameras. A sequence pops up where buttons are laid out on the screen, and you have to hit them in time, or you have to start the sequence all over again. My problem with this is not only is it cheesy, but also almost impossible to fail. It's almost like a smack in the face to players. Surely Bizarre Creations could have thought of a better and less cheesy way to implement disabling security cameras. If we're going to keep this, then maybe have it to if you fail more than twice at completing this minigame, a person from the security room calls one of the men patrolling and said that there's been some weird interference with the cameras and go to check it. That would be a better incentive to not fail. Because the biggest consequence for not being able to hit the button prompts correctly is to just try again. All of this is yet another 2010 cliche. There's a really neat part in this Monaco level where you need to reach an elevator, but it's gated behind a password-protected door. So you have to use your smartphone detective vision to get near the people with some of that information and hack their phone to retrieve it. I know that this may seem like a weird thing to praise, because it's nothing new to video games, but it's something that I found very classic 007. Once you break into Pomerov's safe, you find the video of what Malcolm Tedworth's research was.
I told you. We were investigating anthrax and smallpox to come up with antidotes that could be used in the field in the case of a biological attack. And there was no way to militarize them? To turn them into weapons instead of cures? No!
After that, an alarm is triggered and you need to fight your way through rooms of guards. I already loved this level setting, but fighting goons from room to room just elevated that. The reflections on the floor are impressive, along with the amount of things being broken in the environment as bullets are being shot at you.
There's nothing exceptional or outstanding about the combat here. Again, it's very 2010 and it's quite simple, but it's executed in such a smooth way with nice animations that when a level is set up with very Bondian stealth and hacking in a tuxedo and a great classy location, that context helps make the otherwise standard combat feel smooth and exciting and just cool. Like, this Monaco section in particular is an example of it all coming together fantastically, and it's not the only time that it does.
Here is when I really noticed something. I played the game on medium difficulty, and the enemies go down in about 2 to 3 shots, which is too easy. I could almost run and gun this, but if not for the way that you take damage, it seems like you go down in around 3 to 4 shots. I was frustrated that it was so easy to shoot down enemies, but what made me a little less frustrated was that I wasn't an invincible protagonist. I took damage really fast. Taking this much damage as quickly as you do keeps you from running and gunning your way through this level. It makes you utilize cover a lot more often and strategize. This isn't the first time in the game that I've used a lot of hand-to-hand combat. You pretty much just get close to the enemy, press a button, and then the takedown begins. I used it mainly for stealth kills, but in this level is whenever I really started utilizing it in full-out combat a lot more. Mainly because it's a lot of fun. The takedowns and animations are top-notch, like something you would see in an action movie. They're awesome in stealth, of course, but are elevated when in gunfights. I would go out of my way in a full-out firefight just to do these takedowns because they looked great. The next location in Siberia is a good mixture of the structure of the previous level and the opening one. A good 50% of the areas in Siberia you traverse through are science labs and underground passageways that all really blend together. But the other 50% are gorgeous outside areas that are graced by falling snow. The snow adds personality to a level with the bland atmosphere we've experienced in Siberia so far. The most 70s 007 thing in this game happens when Bond breaks into Pomerov's biometric security area mainframe. Once he's finished, the doors lock around him while poison gas fills the room. As you're trying to escape is when the level starts to show its similarities to the beginning mission in Athens. The over-the-top, high-octane action comes in the form of explosions, fast movements, and a really great car escape section. Unlike the previous time we controlled a car, this one is actually fun. The oil refinery you're escaping is spitting out flames and explosions along with 18-wheeler trucks trying to slam you into one another. The chase gets really exciting when you transition from the ground to driving on top of an iced-out river.
James, what are you doing? You're heading for the river.
Hold on.
When the ice starts breaking around you is when you need to drive on walls, which is super cool. It gets more insane once you ramp off the river face first into the moving train Pomerov is on, and in classic Bond fashion, him and this Bond girl come out perfectly unscathed. Well, except for Nicole, whose broken wrist gets fixed off frame. I know it probably would have called for different character models, but after this crash it would have been a lot more immersive if the main characters didn't walk off without a scratch. I'm not a game developer, but surely it couldn't have been that hard to add some scratches, a little bit of blood, and tears in the clothing. On the other hand, I don't know anything about the development process, so I don't know what time crunch they were under in order to make something like this happen.
Something that Chad and I both really admire about Bloodstone is that when the action ramps up, it really ramps up and just goes off. Like, going from all of that to Nicole piloting a hovercraft armed to the teeth while Bond single-handedly fights all of the Russian soldiers on board while chasing down the plane Pomerov is on, shooting out the engines of that plane, and then transitioning from that to taking more enemies out while walking on the wing of that same plane going full speed over a freezing river in Russia is just so absurd. It's just something special, and moments like this are when Bloodstone really shines the most.
Change of plans.
Even though Pomerov is now dead, the mission isn't over. Bond meets with a contact in Bangkok at an aquarium who is assassinated on the spot. Before he takes a bullet to the head, the informant gives you the information that there's someone else behind all of this. Because, of course there was. His name is Rack. The largest part of the whole Bangkok level is just a big chase scene. After fighting through the aquarium, you chase after the assassin on the rainy rooftops of Bangkok. I really enjoyed this part of the mission, not only because this chase was exciting, but the atmosphere of a rainy city looked great. So far we've talked about a lot of crazy moments, but the most crazy moment in this game is yet again another car chase. But the reason this is different is because you aren't driving an Aston Martin. You're driving a tow truck chasing down a larger-than-life construction truck that is absolutely tearing apart the city of Bangkok. The amount of destruction that's happening in this city is insane. The whole time I was playing this chase scene, the only thing I could think of was, could you imagine if this happened in real life?
This entire section, from the aquarium to running through the city to chasing a giant truck, really is genuinely insane, and though it's only brief, it's one of my favorite moments in Bloodstone. The aquarium is gorgeous and thoughtfully designed with the glowing blue water reflecting off the walls, and then you're thrust into such an absurd, expensive looking chase where, just like in Istanbul, it's truly remarkable how much of the city is modeled, and in this chase, how much of it is destroyed. It just reiterates that when the action ramps up in Bloodstone, it really ramps up.
The rest of this level is really just bland nonsense with nothing to speak of. I know it's hard to follow up a chase between a tow truck and the world's biggest construction truck tearing apart a major city, but it's really just going from area to area with nothing that stands out. You don't find the assassin, but you manage to track down Rack.
It's over, Rack. You're finished.
I know about the kidnappings, the bioweapons, the missing researchers.
I'll give you one last chance, Rack.
You should have quit while you had the chance.
Now in a Burmese prison, Bond gets the crap kicked out of him while in black and white. This being in black and white lasts for a total of 20 seconds. I don't know if they were trying to be stylistic, because right after that it switches back to full color. If you're going to commit to an interrogation scene being in black and white, then commit to the whole scene instead of randomly going back to full color. Now that we finally come face to face with the man behind everything, all I feel is a sense of frustration. This is too late in the game to introduce him. It feels like everything I did before this meant nothing. Tracking down an important missing researcher, stopping the spread of dangerous biometric materials that were going to be weaponized. Yes, I did do things that were beneficial to everything overall, but to spring the main antagonist behind everything last minute really ticked me off. We are way too far into the game for this to happen. It would have been totally fine if we had a notion that there was a bigger bad behind everything, but last minute, this is not okay.
Especially because this game seems to revel in being a tropey typical Bond story. He's in a tuxedo at a casino, he's breaking out of prison, he's travelling the world, he's driving multiple Aston Martins, yet when it comes to the villain, Bloodstone doesn't seize the opportunity of introducing a fun campy Bond villain early and weaving them through the story. Instead it feels like you're just goose chasing random nobodies until the end of the game, and the overarching narrative comes across as very boilerplate as a result. It lacks character in the ways that Bond stories really shouldn't.
When going into a 007 game, I don't expect it to have a great narrative, but I expect it to make sense and work on the most basic of levels. Although Rack looks like every bad guy I've ever seen in a subpar video game, the actor playing him did great.
Take a very good look at this knife, Mr. Bond. It's platinum, encrusted with precious stones and diamonds, designed to elicit the most exquisite pain when I use it to eviscerate a man and skin him alive. You talk, Mr. Bond. You give up your secrets. Sooner or later, they all do.
The next area of the game is something that may not even be worth talking about. It's just plain Jane ugly brown and gray military camp. After that, you make your way through a large dam, possibly referencing GoldenEye, and face off against Rack himself. By now, you would expect an insane boss fight, but it leaves something to be desired. All you really do is fight off enemies and dodge helicopter fire so you can make your way up to a crane and bust the dam for him to fall off. The final encounter with Rack is pathetic. He is the only person in the game so far that has caught Bond off guard, but Bond takes him out in less than a minute. This final boss battle would have been a lot more intense if you got to face off with Rack yourself, dodging his attacks and hitting him when he slips up. That way, his death is much more earned. It's hard for me to get excited about defeating him when I've only known him for about 45 minutes and had an encounter with him once that had nothing of significance. You never end up fighting Rack yourself, it just all plays out in a cutscene.
Bond, help me.
You had your chance, Rack.
Please, save me. I'll tell you everything. I'll tell you who I'm working with.
Too late. I already know.
Once you defeat Rack, a cutscene plays where Nicole is sitting in an office and opens a box with Rack's knife in it. It seems to turn out that she was the one behind this all along, because of course she was. She races off in her car and you race after her in another really fun chase scene until you finally run her off the road. Nicole reveals that she has a boss that's the one really behind this. She's shot dead by a drone, and the game ends with James Bond will return. And then he never did. Unfortunately, due to poor sales of Bloodstone, the studio shut down. The last James Bond game to date was 007 Legends, where you play through classic scenes in the James Bond franchise, but only as Daniel Craig. Weirdly enough, while making this video, it was announced that IO Interactive, the developers behind Hitman, are currently developing their own 007 game. It's safe to say that the narrative of Bloodstone was absolute garbage. You can throw it off as oh, it's just a spy story, it doesn't have to be deep, you're here for the action. When I would reply with, why can't it be deep? Bloodstone really had something to prove. It was a standalone Bond story with high production value. I guess they didn't have enough money to gather people to write a story that's actually good. What is the Bloodstone? Was it the red gem in Rack's blade? Why wasn't there a real presence of a greater threat the whole time to incentivize the player to get to the bottom of who's pulling all of the strings? It's just frustrating for such a great game to be lacking in such an important part. I finished the game at a solid 5 hours, which I would probably be a little upset with if I paid full price for it on release, but I don't need replay value or a minimum hour length to justify a purchase. As a part-time video creator and a brand new dad who only gets about an hour to an hour and a half of playing games per night, if I'm lucky, a 5-hour game is a godsend.
A sequel to Bloodstone was actually in development by a different studio named Raven Software. It was called 007 Risiko, a reference to an old Ian Fleming Bond story of the same name, and there's not a lot known about it, but we did actually get to see some leaked gameplay of a nearly finished level, and it looks very similar to Bloodstone, though it appears to be running on a different engine. Assumedly, Bloodstone didn't perform to Activision's expectations, and so Risiko was shut down, and since then its developer Raven Software, who did make some great games in the 90s and 2000s, got sucked into the Call of Duty machine. I would have loved to have seen their take on 007 and have seen this story get tied up, but sadly it didn't happen.
The game has a level select for you to go back and play through your favorite levels, but what I found important about a level select feature in this game is to go back and retrieve any intel that you may not have gotten throughout your first playthrough. It's so annoying to have to replay an entire game if you've only missed a collectible or two. These are easy to track by looking at the in-game achievements on the main menu to show your progress. More games with collectibles need to implement this into their own games so we aren't having to follow a guide step by step and waste a ton of time. I didn't dive into the multiplayer because, obviously, but I looked up some online gameplay and it looks like a boring team deathmatch mode where you just play as random soldiers.
Having briefly played the multiplayer myself, it absolutely is just that. It barely even resembles a Bond game and could well have slotted in with any military shooter from 2010. I guess this is Bloodstone ticking those 2010 boxes again. Like, it's not bad, but it's not notably good either.
Now that I've talked quite a bit about the narrative and walked you through the game, it's time to talk about the gameplay. I've mentioned some things like focus aim, takedowns, smartphone, detective vision, hacking minigames, and things of the sort. But let's talk about the moment-to-moment gameplay. Bloodstone, being a third-person cover shooter, is a warm welcome because most 007 games since GoldenEye on the Nintendo 64 have been first-person shooters. Since that game revolutionized the game industry, they must have felt that, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But I always thought that this game series would have benefited a whole lot more from a third-person perspective, like was in 2004's Everything or Nothing. Not only am I partial to third-person perspectives in cover shooters, I just think that this game feels better in third person. Also, it's a good change of pace when you've been playing 007 games for so long. The shooting gameplay is the type of, if you've played them once, you played them all. It's not like it's bad or anything, it just controls the same as 90% of all the other third-person cover shooters out there. The only problem I really had was the auto-aim. The game does use lock-on auto-aim as soon as you press the left trigger, shoot, go back into dodging, and then repeat. I looked in the menu for an option to turn this off, but it was nowhere to be found. I'm never really one for auto-aim in games, but it didn't ruin my experience or anything. I just found it slightly annoying. There's some motion blur in the game with no option to be turned off, but it was perfect for me. The blur makes for a smoother experience, which is often the intention when it's applied liberally to 30 FPS shooters like this. In more single-player cinematic type games like this, I prefer some motion blur, but not a lot. To me, this was the perfect amount. It really shines when you perform a takedown in combat, too. I found one pretty annoying hiccup in the gameplay design, and that's the sprint length. Just like most games, you sprint by pushing in the left thumbstick and moving it forward. But if you sprint for more than 6 seconds, you stop and start jogging. This is especially annoying in the Bangkok level where you're chasing an assassin and you need to rely on, your speed. After I noticed this, I tested it in parts in the rest of the game and got the same thing. I couldn't imagine playing on the highest difficulty and needing to rely on that sprint for it only to run out within a matter of seconds. When I started up this game, my girlfriend was around and she saw the first cutscene and out loud said, "Wow, those graphics look rough." And she wasn't wrong. The cutscenes do look rough. But for the time it came out, it looked great. My only gripes for the visuals are the cutscenes. The faces are expressionless and don't help with the actors other than Judi Dench totally phoning it in for the paycheck.
Who is it? Who hired you? Give me the name.
Everything else looks excellent. The visual presentation is spot on. The coloring is moody and movie-like. The explosions and sceneries are stunning. The set pieces are gorgeous. The cutscenes look bad because they are all in-engine. I think maybe if they were pre-rendered cutscenes instead, this would be a different story. I would consider Bloodstone to be one of the most graphically impressive games of its generation. When the cutscenes were playing, there was something annoying going on. Flashing circles indicated loading, and a button prompt to skip the cutscene or pause. These were up the entire time and every single cutscene. The reason you haven't seen it until now is because I cropped them out for my sake of the video. This really took me out of what was happening in the cutscenes, but they didn't really have me invested in every second of the story. Plus the phoned-in acting had me mentally check out when a cutscene started. This is nothing that's a huge deal, just crazy annoying. Regarding the soundtrack, I found it to be subpar other than the title opening theme. The PS3 and Xbox 360 are the same game. I don't know about the PC release since I'm not a PC gamer, but I assume it's the same as the console releases. Bloodstone did in fact receive a port to the Nintendo DS. I haven't picked this one up yet, but from what I've seen, it's quite graphically impressive. It seems to be relatively the same type of game as the console. A fully 3D cover-based over-the-shoulder perspective on the DS is something I never would have thought would have been able to be done. I really love 007 Bloodstone. The way the team crafted their action set pieces were so memorable in a way that I still randomly think about how excellent they are. If you know me, you know that I love crazy, stupid, over-the-top, fun action, and Bloodstone delivered, and then some. The gameplay worked great. The visuals and presentation other than the cutscenes are top-notch and still hold up today. The takedowns and animations were perfectly executed. No pun intended. The muted color palette fits this game's atmosphere and mood very well, even though every once in a while I would have liked for it to show some more vibrance. Even though that the story was really bad, the sprinting was janky, the no ability to turn off auto-aim, and the mini-games, I fell in love with pretty much everything else. If you like James Bond, and if you like third-person shooters, this is a must-own.
To me, Bloodstone is a very typical third-person shooter from that generation of consoles. Like, immediately it draws comparisons to Uncharted and Gears of War, which you may interpret as a negative, but it's kind of the appeal of it. It's already aging very well, and that's not only thanks to its visuals. Because Bloodstone is so short, so fast-paced, and has such snappy, well-executed and familiar combat, it's a very consumable high-octane romp with some great set pieces, locations, and Bond stuff. It's Bond's roller coaster summer holiday action movie directed by Michael Bay. Sure, it falls short in some places, particularly with the plot, and obviously it was never gonna win any awards, but if you want an exciting high production cover shooter to escape to over a weekend, Bloodstone is exactly that.
Thank you to everyone who has gotten this far, and thank you to my good friend minimme for journeying through this game with me.
And thank you to Chad for having me on. If you'd like to check out my channel, I review all sorts of oddities and old licensed games like the Bond games. I'm actually working on a video about the GoldenEye remake if that interests you. If not, no worries, I'm just happy to be here.
Check out his video he did on Bloodstone over on his channel. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell so you don't miss any of our videos. You can join me in supporting him on Patreon by following the link in the bio. Stay safe out there, everyone.